All right, sports fans, greetings. It is Saturday, May 18th, 2024, still the third decade of the 21st century. For anybody that's new to my channel, I always open with that to sort of try to draw and focus on the fact that we are actually in the third decade of the 21st century. And let's take a look at what we're talking about. What kind of issues are we discussing based on where people had once hypothesized we would be as a society? Now, look. Part of my channel's mantra is we need to have these conversations. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to face one another and have these discussions, because otherwise we devolve into our echo chambers of reinforcing behaviors, reinforcing thoughts, and we start to basically form teams and draw lines in the sand when, you know, human behavior will always do something like that, but maybe we should do that over things of more substance versus some of this nonsense. But granted, what I think is nonsense, somebody else could find very, very important. And that is something I've had to recognize when I decided to put myself out there on the interwebs, is that, you know, I might not value something somebody else does. I might value something that somebody else doesn't. But yet, can we still try to get along? Can we still try to communicate with another? Can we still maybe not demonize the other person and dehumanize them because we just don't see eye to eye on something? So I had to go through my different videos and try to compile some of the responses so that I can read, react, and reply. And I apologize if there's somewhat out of order, but I'm doing my best. All right, so Fox 579. I like the Democrat-Republican dog shit metaphor. I'm going to use it if you don't mind. Feel free. In fact, I don't know that it's actually mine. I don't know if I actually made that up. Maybe I stole that. Oh, okay. FJ, we'll call that 7. I think we've spoken before. I think that's Frank. My apologies. All right. Fully agree that our experiences shape who we are. I was raised Republican about as dem of a place as you can get, leading me to try and be as even-headed as my monkey brain allows me. Thank you for the reply, by the way. I should say that the Democrats, to my understanding, are as old as America, with Thomas Jefferson among their founders. You made an interesting point about the Dixiecrats. Most intellectual types will argue about the party switch, and I personally believe Republicans threw in with the Southern ideologies that were molded by a defense of slavery like states' rights. In my reading of history, which I do compulsively, I often identify with what the Republican Party used to be before circa 1980. Glad to see your engagement is way up on stuff not related to that controversy. I'm a history lover, so you got me to stick around mentioning anything like socio-political. Yeah, so we may disagree on this as far as, like, say, my reasonings, but I am just not a fan of the Democratic Party, like what they were founded on, principles, etc. But that doesn't mean I'm a registered Republican and that I love the Republican Party and I love where they've gotten to. You know, I'd like to see the two-party system change. I'd like to see alternative parties come out of this and become viable candidates where, you know, perhaps we could find a candidate. Like, I've always looked at the independents, the Green Party, and oh my God, they're just not good. I mean, even what's his face, the Kennedy son with the bad voice, Robert Kennedy, I think it is, maybe Robert Kennedy Jr. I apologize, but like, even him, I'm not 100% sure. I'm like, oh, you know, that makes sense, and that's a bunch of monkey crap. But yeah, yeah. Okay, Michael Sutherland. I relate well to your upbringing. Lived a similar life growing up in Colorado as well. I registered GOP at 18 in about 2000, and then left in 2008 as unaffiliated or independent, depending on the state I live in. At the time, I was in Alaska, and seeing how the political science majors who were the handlers of Sarah Palin completely warped her and drove me away. She was a great governor, and the GOP and McCain destroyed that legacy and any progress she had made in Alaska. Certainly my wake-up call about the problems that exist in the dual-party system. Yeah, I mean, it's funny how one moment in time a circumstance can present itself, like, say, Sarah Palin being a vice presidential candidate for John McCain, going up against the Goliath that would eventually be Obama, could destroy her legacy because of how it was handled. Becky Muttley. I'm transgender. I decided to transition several years after I left the Army. I had the benefit of testosterone on my muscle mass, bone density, and long bone size for years. I can spend all the time and money in the world making myself look female, and I have, but I cannot escape the reality of how I was before. I still do MMA, which I have to do with males, otherwise it would amount to assault rather than sport. Same goes for climbing. We all saw that Fallon Fox fight in the UFC. Dana tried to do a good thing by allowing that fight to take place because it was a really rare thing then, and what took place that day wasn't a fight. It was just an attack by someone who should have known better. Real quick, on that particular subject, I don't necessarily believe in being physically violent towards women. I don't think it's a very masculine, manly thing to do. I do not have a problem whatsoever sicking my wife on a bitch. I'm just saying. If any woman took testosterone, they would not be able to compete in competitive sports because they will have been deemed to have used a performance-enhancing drug. True story. Please believe me when I say Twitter hates me more for saying this stuff than it would you. It just goes to show how full of it the left can be. Fortunately, I do not concern myself with the opinions of civilians. You know, Becky, on that notion there, you know, saying that you're transgender, I don't have a problem with people existing. I don't have a problem if you're gay, straight, bi, transgender for that matter. And from what I get out of this, if I'm understanding your communication, you're also not trying to involve yourself in areas like, say, competitive sports where you could have an adverse effect on, say, women who are competing for something, scholarship, prize money, recognition. You know, you're not trying to take advantage of your biological birth to compete at a very high level to include recognition against women. It sounds, and if I get this correctly, it sounds like you reach the determination, this is who you are, this is how you want to present yourself, and you're just trying to live your life, and you're not trying to overly involve yourself in areas to draw unnecessary attention and potentially win awards and accolades. You're just trying to live who you are. And I can respect that, and I can get behind that. It's the people that, you know, like the swimmer and Fallon Fox and all these other, that's where I have some issues. And maybe it sounds like we're on the same page there. Stace, welcome back. One, Trump, basically his supporters paid to silence Stormy based on the payment endorsement to hush her up. Two, have you looked at RFK Jr.? I wish you would state like a portion of the party feels like this, or that the pedophile comment, because you and I have been able to disagree on different ideologies in a civil way, and I hope we can continue. But when you don't clarify that you aren't assuming all of one party shares the same beliefs, if that makes sense, I will be amazed as I am currently medicated. I'm not really sure what to say. I think RFK is probably a halfway decent third-party candidate. I don't know if I can fully get behind him. If Trump did pay Stormy Daniels to shut the hell up, then he should get his money back because she's not shutting the hell up. I do appreciate you and I being able to have civil discourse, even though we disagree on certain things. I think at the end of the day, I'm just not a big fan of the two-party system. I personally don't think the Democratic Party should have survived the Civil War, but I'm not overly in love with the Republican Party. You also say I look super young, clean-shaven. Thank you. I hope that is a compliment, because I'm looking at myself right now, I don't necessarily feel young. Michael Walmsley, I thought it was just me who had these views. Now I'm thinking it's a Gen X thing. You know, Michael, on that particular note, I want to say this. I think Gen X might feel that way, but I also think Gen X is also responsible for a lot of this stuff. I think Generation X was the generation that actually was curious about what's behind the door. If the door was labeled taboo, I think we were the first generation to be like, well, what's behind this door? Oh, people with tattoos. They're just people. Tattoos aren't that taboo. Oh, people with piercings. Piercings aren't that taboo. Oh, guys who like guys, girls who like girls. They can still do their jobs. They can still earn a living. They're not really affecting me. If it's a good-looking guy that's gay, then that's just one less guy I've got to compete with as a heterosexual male. Thank God Matt Bomer's gay. Just saying. However, on that note, I think we forgot to put controls in place. We forgot to put a bouncer at the door. We forgot to put up a gatekeeper, and in a positive sense. When we opened the door, we didn't close it. As we normalized certain things like, say, homosexuality, bisexuality, piercings, tattoos, the like, we also opened up the door to the opportunity for other things to spill out, to the point where some things we find utterly ridiculous is what we're dealing with in the third decade of the 21st century. And I think, in all honesty, if you take a closer look, you have to put the blame on Generation X, because I think to some degree, depending on how you determine what generation's what, if I'm not mistaken, I think Generation X at some point gave birth to millennials. Some boomers may have given birth to millennials, but some older Generation X may have given birth to millennials. So just a little food for thought. Mike K. I'm Mike Kim, veteran. I wrote a comment on an April show you presented. Just want to be transparent. Hey, brah, why don't you interview Senior Chief Eric Deming? I'm sure he could defend himself. Mike, on that note, nothing against your comment. I don't really do the interview thing on this channel. Probably because nobody's really offered to participate. But I don't know that it's really necessary, other than I think he's already said what he wants to say. If I've oversold the fact that maybe I have some proof or evidence that what he's suggesting didn't happen, that's not it at all. What I was really suggesting is, I don't know where the XO got his evidence from. I'm not saying he doesn't have it. I just don't know where he got it from, because I don't remember those things happening. So just be careful who you put faith in. Be careful, if you're going to throw stones, be careful where you get them from. But then you commented again, haha, too many Bannon and Dinesh movies. Please read Fonner and The Real History About the Civil War, and also about the politics of the past that led up to our present expressions of politics in America. Seems like you are coming from the historians out of the Jim Crow era at Columbia University, Dunning School of History. That is what set up the simplistic understanding of America in school books, instead of looking at the truth of Jim Crow. The dismantling of Reconstruction, the fear of dark folks, etc. Read about the realities of Freedmen Bureau. It was set up by Colonel McKay and a few others. McKay, who described the reality of the horrors of slavery and the different ways to help black Americans after the tyranny of CSA on the southern part of America, Confederate States of America? Okay, CSA, Confederate States of America, on the southern part of America. This helped many African Americans until the KKK and other groups and the Northern Copperheads also were a force to keep blacks as slaves in the form of sharecroppers. I see certain folks now acting like the folks who set up Jim Crow. But now the language is, for example, big government is bad, meaning in code, only when blacks work for it or get benefit from it. It was good when the GI Bill set up the white middle class. Man, as in The Godfather, Duvall says, he played it well. Brah, you played it well. These days, many cannot be direct about their bias, so they go Lee Atwater word salad so they are not accused of being racist. I do not accuse you of being racist, but I think you are part of this new wave of kinder and more articulate group of conservatives. Jack and Kemp was a moderate conservative. You ain't no Jack Kemp, haha. Nor are these folks who talk, oh, I'm moderate my ass. I would privately or publicly debate you anywhere, anytime. Peace. Hey, Mike, thanks for the comment. I apologize. You're throwing some historical references at me I'm not overly familiar with. I'll try to do my best to understand and respond. And as somebody who grew up in the North, I'm well aware that not everybody in the North was a pure abolitionist or not racist. That the misconception that everybody north of the Mason-Dixon was like, oh, everybody's equal in the eyes of the Lord, and nobody was racist. Far from it. I remember a lot of different things growing up. I remember the Black Pride movement of the 1990s, the clothing, you know, Spike Lee movies. I remember coming out of the Clinton era or coming into the Clinton era where, you know, and the whole Rodney King thing, it seemed like other than white was getting a big push. I remember also growing up, we still had ethnic neighborhoods in Chicago where, you know, if you weren't ethnic enough, you had to have a reason or an escort for being there. I don't personally consider myself a racist. However, I'm not a big fan of the concept of taking pride in one's skin color. I'm a bigger fan of taking pride in things of substance like your actions, taking pride in, I don't know, your family, your legacy, taking pride in your country, taking pride in your accomplishments. I've never been a big fan of taking pride in one's pigmentation, as though that in and of itself is a form of racism, because by having pride in your pigmentation, well, in order to, you know, give, you got to take from somewhere else, which nobody has to agree, but if you're going to put precedence on pigmentation, you have to take it from somewhere else, which means if you're proud of your skin color, then you must think less of somebody else who doesn't share it. It's Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I know people will try to argue with me day in and day out, but if you're putting precedence, if you're putting pride on a particular pigmentation, it's because you devalue another form of pigmentation. I'm sorry if I'm inflexible on that. If that makes me a racist, then so be it. To your point, yeah, I don't think anybody with any kind of rational sense can deny any kind of bias. I myself have bias. I try like hell every day to overcome it, but at the end, I still have my own personal bias. I don't know what it is, but like when I hear the left or the progressives or the liberals or the Democrats talk, I'm just like, oh, ugh, I just cringe. That doesn't mean that when I hear the Republicans talk, I'm like, yes, good stuff. No, far from it. I find myself less nauseated, if that makes any sense. Still nauseated. I don't know. I just think that if you consider it in the form of boundaries, right? The left is trying super hard to find boundaries in order to exceed them, and to what end, I don't know. To what purpose, I don't know. If at the risk of sounding narcissistic and plugging my channel in my previous videos, one thing I've said in the past is, if there's power brokers working on behalf of, say, the Democratic Party, what is their end game? What is their, because I can't believe it's this equity and this equality and this DEI and whatnot. I think these are all ploys and maneuvers to achieve a greater result, which is, I don't know, maybe another civil war, because all that's going to do is create further division amongst people who ordinarily don't care, but when they're constantly being told about how devalued they are, how evil they are, how wicked they are, how privileged they are because of the pigmentation of their skin or immutable characteristics, right? And how guilty you should feel for all these past events that took place for people that did not suffer these past events, but, you know, they were born like in the 21st century, and they're trying to feel some sort of victim status. It's to me, the whole thing is absurd, but it's the world we're living in. Thus my opening phrase, welcome to the third decade of the 21st century. I mean, in my opinion, I understand why we had historically black colleges in the third decade of the 21st century. I thought we'd reached a point where we no longer need them. They're not necessary. They should just be colleges. But I also don't know what it's like to be anything other than me, so how can I pretend to appreciate and understand any of those experiences? I really can't. I can only speak for myself, and for myself, I don't feel like we should be focusing on what makes us different that much. There'll always be differences. You know, some people will like sports, some people won't. Some people like chocolate, some people don't. I mean, and the human condition always seeks to form to form groups with other like-minded people. That's just naturally going to happen. But on the other subject, publicly debate, Mike, I don't know if we necessarily need to debate, but I mean, if you want to get on Skype or Zoom or whatever is trending right now and have a discussion, if it looks like a debate, then so be it. I've tried it in the past. I've tried to do Zooms with at least 2 other people in the legacy of my channel. Um, Only one of them didn't really end well, and I have to admit, I try like hell to be objective. I'm not saying I always am, but I really felt like the other one was belligerently narcissistic. Like, I don't know how many times I had to hear about how educated they were and how educated they were on the mind and human behavior, and yet they didn't finish the degree because it was somebody else's fault, and there was all these other external factors because victim, 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 victim. And I mean, technically on paper, I'm educated. I've got an associate's degree in general studies. I've got a Bachelor of Liberal Arts degree in Homeland Security with a focus on counterterrorism, and I've got a Bachelor of Science degree in cybersecurity with a focus on intrusion and loss mitigation. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm smart. It just means I put in the work and I completed the task and I got the grade. But yeah, Mike, if you want to try to arrange something for the weekend where we maybe get on Zoom or something and have a discussion, it might be beneficial because, sorry, I'm moving the mouse here, because it might do nothing more than to demonstrate to other people that we can disagree, we can have civil discourse and be like, yeah, you're still a decent person, you still pay your taxes, you still go to work, you still earn a living, you still vote, you know, and you're still a decent person. I recognize you as a decent person. I just don't have to agree with everything. If that looks like a debate, if it looks like a discussion, whatever. And hopefully people are starting to get the idea of what my channel's about. I'm really just trying to create discussion, and I'm a little taken back and somewhat embarrassed at how my channel's getting more and more attention, because intent versus impact, I've often said, can be mutually exclusive. What you intend to happen versus the impact may not always match up. I never intended to create more popularity for my channel. I never intended to get involved in any kind of controversy. Never once in my life have I really gotten to the point where I was even on a phone call with somebody. But it is what it is. We're at where we're at. If people start to fall off, it is what it is. I'm okay with obscurity. I'm okay with a total viewership of 1 or 2, but I do appreciate the viewers, and more importantly, I appreciate the comments. And as you've seen, as long as I don't get overwhelmed, I do my level best to read, react, and respond. So with that, y'all are awesome. Be safe out there. Let's continue these conversations.